I'm not telling you this to warn you. I want to be clear about that from the start, because everything I'm about to say is going to sound like a warning. And I need you to understand the difference. A warning implies, I think it will happen to you. I don't. I'm telling you this because I spent 7 nights in a fire lookout tower in the Ozark-St. Francis National Forest. And I came home, and I have not been able to fully convince myself of what I saw or what I did not see. And I have found, in the weeks since, that the only way to keep the uncertainty from expanding is to say it out loud in an ordered sequence, the way I was trained to document a fire. Start at the origin. Move outward. Describe what you observed and what you inferred, and keep the 2 columns separate. I was a wildland firefighter for 6 years before I became a lookout. My job for 6 years was to look at things directly and respond to what I saw. Read the smoke, read the terrain, move fast, decide quickly, trust your eyes above everything, because in the field, your eyes are the instrument, and if your instrument fails, people get hurt. That was my professional foundation. Not bravery, not endurance, visual acuity, and the willingness to act on it. I am telling you this because the first thing I need you to understand before the tower, before the rules, before any of what happened on the later nights, is that my eyes are the part of me I trusted most. And what I learned at Harlan's Peak is that something out there knew that. Something understood, with a patience I cannot quantify, that the most effective way to reach a person like me was not through fear. It was through the act of looking itself. I trusted my eyes more than anything. That was the problem. They give you a pamphlet when they post you to a fire lookout tower. It covers the Osborne firefinder, the radio check-in protocol, the fire weather observation log, and the daily sector scan. It covers what a smoke column looks like at different stages. The white, billowing early plume versus the flat gray of a suppressed fire versus the black column of a structure burn. It covers wind readings and humidity thresholds and what constitutes a red flag fire weather day. It is a thorough pamphlet. I read it twice on the drive in. What it does not cover is the quality of light at 70 feet above the tree line at 6 a.m. when the forest below you is still dark and the cab is already full of sun. What it does not tell you is how the wind sounds against the glass walls at elevation. Not howling, not dramatic, just a constant, low-grade pressure that becomes the ambient sound of your entire world within 12 hours. What it does not prepare you for is the particular feeling of being inside a glass room that has no wall without a view. Every direction is outside. The forest surrounds the tower on all 4 compass quadrants, beginning 40 feet from the base and running unbroken to the horizon in every direction I could see. The cab is beautiful. I want to say that clearly. On a good morning, with the light coming in low from the east and the forest running out below you, like something poured across the hills. There is nowhere on earth that feels more like the center of something important. The job is to watch. I am, professionally, someone who watches. For about 6 hours on my first full day, it felt like the assignment I was supposed to have. But there is something the pamphlet cannot prepare you for. And it is this. In a glass-walled cab, 70 feet above the forest floor, the person inside the cab is the one who is visible. The tree line begins 40 feet away and is opaque. You cannot see into it, not even in full daylight. The trees see you from the moment you arrive. The design of the tower, unintentionally or not, puts you on display. The watcher watched. I noticed this on a first afternoon. I filed it as a mild, interesting irony. I did not yet understand that the irony was the entire point. The previous occupant, a woman named Delaney, had requested early reassignment 2 weeks before her rotation ended. The district office approved it without comment. I found out about that on the drive-in, and I remember thinking, she must have been lonely. That was what I thought. Lonely. I was wrong about almost everything in those first hours, but I was most wrong about that. The Forest Service road to the Harlan's Peak trailhead is 9 miles of packed gravel that cuts through second-growth shortleaf pine and mixed hardwood. And it is the kind of road that demands your full attention, not because it's dangerous, but because the moment you stop watching the surface, a rut or a washed-out shoulder will catch you. I'd driven roads like it 100 times, with a fire crew in the truck bed and a radio in my hand, reading the vegetation for moisture content, checking the understory for ladder fuel, cataloging everything automatically the way a trained eye does when it has nowhere else to go. The Ozark forest in late summer is dense and green and visually loud. Every layer of it is doing something the canopy, moving in one wind pattern, the mid-story in another, the undergrowth still. I watched the treetops as I drove. The movement was from the southwest, steady at about 8 to 10 miles per hour, based on the sway patterns. Humidity was low for the region. The air coming through the window smelled like dry pine and the particular dusty warmth of forest floor in August heat. Good fire weather, technically. The kind of morning that looks beautiful and means conditions are right for something to start. I pulled into the trailhead parking area at 7:14 a.m. and sat in the truck for a moment before getting out. The silence was immediate and complete. No other vehicles, no sound from the trail, no wind at ground level, even though the canopy above was moving. I have never been someone who finds silence uncomfortable, but the silence at the Harlan's Peak trailhead was specific in a way I noticed without understanding. It had a weight to it, not threatening, just present. I laced my boots, shouldered my pack, and started the 6.2-mile trail to the tower. The climb gained about 800 feet over the first 2 miles before leveling onto a long ridge that ran northeast. The trail was clear and well marked. I moved at an easy pace and kept my eyes moving the way I always do. Scanning left quadrant, center, right quadrant. Repeat. Old firefighter habit. You read your environment continuously, or you don't read it at all. I saw the tower from the last ridge bend, maybe a quarter mile out, rising above the canopy in the early light. Harlan's Peak Tower is an L4 cab-style structure, 70 feet of galvanized steel angle iron with a single flight of switchback stairs and a glass-walled observation cab at the top. From a distance, it looks slight, almost fragile, the way any tall, narrow structure looks when you can see the full length of it. The glass caught the morning sun and threw it back as a single bright point. like a signal fire, I thought, or a mirror. I walked the last quarter-mile without stopping. The forest pressed close on both sides of the trail. The short-leaf pine here was old enough that the lower branches were gone, leaving clean trunks rising into a canopy 20 feet up. The understory was open. You could see a long way into the trees in the morning light. I noted this as a professional positive good sightlines on approach, minimal ladder fuel risk from the trail. I was still reading the forest as terrain. I was not yet reading it as anything else. The supply cache at the base of the tower is a green metal box bolted to the concrete pad, about the size of a small chest freezer. Dispatch had confirmed it would be stocked for a 7-day rotation. Water, food, emergency supplies, maintenance materials. It was stocked. Everything was there. But the arrangement of it stopped me for a moment. I can only describe as a pause that had no rational cause. The supplies were not just stocked. They were arranged. The water containers were flush against the left wall in descending order by size. The food was separated by category. The maintenance kit was centered on the right side, with the contents fanned out in a half circle, each item visible without lifting anything. It was the kind of arrangement a person makes when they are expecting someone specific, when they want that person to be able to find everything immediately, when they have thought ahead to what the arriving person will need, and in what order. Dispatch had said the cache would be resupplied by the district driver. Callen, I would later learn his name was. He'd serviced this tower for over 2 decades. I told myself it was just the habits of someone who had done the same job long enough to do it precisely. I told myself this without fully believing it, and started climbing. The stairs are 47 steps, switchbacking at 3 landings. I counted them automatically on the way up, another old habit, one I didn't think about until later. The steel rang under my boots in a specific, flat tone that I can still reproduce exactly in my head. The tower swayed slightly in the upper section. A controlled give that is structural and normal, and still takes adjustment. The views opened at each landing. At the first, I could see over the immediate understory. At the second, over the canopy. At the third, over the ridge to the northeast. From the third landing, the forest looked continuous and undifferentiated. A single surface, broken only by topography. Not individual trees. A system. I reached the cab, unlocked the door with the key dispatch had provided, and stepped inside. The cab was clean. The Osborne firefighter was mounted in the center of the room on its pedestal, the alidade arm resting against its map pin at true north. The radio sat on the desk at the north wall, charged and functional. I checked the frequency first, then the transmit key, then set it back. The logbook was open on the desk to a fresh page with the date pre-printed at the top. Everything in order, everything where it should be. I set my pack down and did a full equipment check. Batteries, compass, weather instruments, firefinder calibration. 12 minutes of standard arrival procedure. Nothing unusual. I was methodical. I have always been methodical. It is the thing I am best at when I am afraid. And I want to be honest, I was not afraid yet. I was alert. There is a difference that experienced field people understand, and and that I did not fully appreciate until I stopped being able to tell them apart. When I lifted the radio log to check the previous entries, something slid out from beneath it and landed face up on the desk. A laminated card, about the size of a standard sheet of paper, sealed in clear plastic that had yellowed slightly at the edges. At the top, in clean block text, it read, "Harlan's Peak Observation, Protocols, Supplemental." I picked it up. It was heavier than it should have been. I want to tell you that my first reaction was professional skepticism. I want to tell you, I read it with the detached, mildly annoyed competence of someone who has been given an unofficial addendum to a procedure manual and is sorting through it for anything operationally relevant. And for the first 3 rules, that is more or less true. The card was formatted like a standard handout. Clean font, numbered list, no header graphic. It looked like something a district safety officer might produce not quite official enough for the main protocol binder, not quite informal enough to be dismissed. Rule 1 told me to complete my evening radio check-in before the light failed completely, and that if I missed the window, I should not use the radio until morning. Rule 2 told me that if the Osborne firefinder was not centered on the map pin when I woke, I should not move it back. I should note the new bearing in the log and begin my morning scan from that position. Rule 3 told me not to count the steps when descending after sunset, and that if I lost count, I should sit where I was and wait for the wind before continuing. I read all 3 in about 45 seconds. My brain produced explanations for each of them in roughly the same time. Radio interference from nocturnal atmospheric inversion layers is documented in the literature. Certain elevation profiles create reception anomalies after dark. The Osborne is a physical instrument on a pedestal. Vibration from wind load on the tower structure could shift its calibration over time, and noting the drift would be good practice. Low light disorientation on metal stairs is real, and using an environmental anchor wind sound in Rule 3 is a plausible grounding technique. Odd rules, but explainable. I filed them and moved to Rule 4. I read Rule 4 once, then I read it again. Then a third time, more slowly, in case I had missed an operational context that would resolve it. Do not look directly at the tree line between the hours of 2200 and 0400. Use your peripheral vision only. If you feel the need to look, close your eyes and count backward from 30 before opening them. I set the card down. I picked it up again. I looked at the tree line through the south window, full daylight, 8 a.m. Every tree visible and sharp and entirely ordinary. I looked back at the card. There was no asterisk. There was no explanation appended. No note about atmospheric optical effects or wildlife disturbance protocols or any other framework that would make the rule legible. It simply said, do not look. Not because something will happen to you, not because something is there. It said, do not look, as if the act of looking itself was the mechanism of whatever consequence the rule was designed to prevent. I turned the card over. In small handwriting, pressed into the plastic from the back, as if written before the lamination. These work. I promise. D. Delaney. I put the card down on the desk. I did not put it in a drawer. I did not file it anywhere. I left it face up in the center of the desk surface and looked at it for a moment. In the same way you look at a math problem, you can solve every step of, but whose answer keeps coming out wrong. I told myself I would ask dispatch about it during the evening check-in. I told myself there was a perfectly reasonable operational history behind it that simply hadn't been communicated at briefing. I told myself that Delaney, whoever she was, whatever had made her leave early, had been anxious in a way that produced hyper-local personal safety protocols, and that the I promise at the bottom was the note of someone who needed to believe her own anxiety management strategies were real. I told myself all of this while setting up my equipment. I told myself all of this while doing my first orientation scan. I kept the card exactly where it was. A person who genuinely believed their own rationalization would have put it in a drawer. I know that now. The first full afternoon at Harlan's Peak was absorbing in the way lookout work is when you let it be. Each sector of the horizon requires real attention, real reading, and the Ozark canopy from elevation is complex enough to hold your focus without demanding it. I worked the Osborne through a full 360-degree sweep, noting azimuth landmarks, calibrating my distance estimates against the topo map. The fire weather was moderate relative humidity, around 28%, wind from the southwest at steady 9 miles per hour, a thin haze on the western horizon that was likely vehicle exhaust from the highway corridor 30 miles out. Not smoke. I worked the sector scan in 15-degree increments, the way the protocol specifies, and I was good at it. This is the part of the job that connects to who I used to be before the back injury ended my field career. The part that requires trained vision, pattern recognition, the ability to distinguish between what belongs in a landscape and what is wrong with it. For those 6 hours, sitting at the Osborne and working the horizon, I felt something close to useful. Not diminished, not sidelined, useful. I thought about the rules during the scan, and I was deliberate about it. The way you think through a procedure you're going to have to follow. Rule 1 had a rational shell, even if the core was odd. Atmospheric inversion, nocturnal radio interference, is real. I'd experienced distorted transmissions on fire assignments at elevation, voices fragmenting into static at the wrong hours for no clear equipment reason. The rule's restriction was unusual, but the underlying phenomenon it might be responding to had precedent. Rule 2 bothered me more under examination. The Osborne firefinder cannot move on its own. That is not a caveat. It is a physical statement. The instrument sits on a fixed pedestal mount. The alidate arm has drag friction built into its movement. It requires deliberate force to rotate. Vibration from wind load would need to be extraordinary to move it, even a fraction of a degree. And I was standing in a well-maintained structure with no signs of degraded mounting hardware. The rule assumed movement as a given, not as a possibility, but as a regular event. Something to note in the log. Something to scan from. As if the firefinder, moving overnight, was simply part of the posting. As if Harlan's Peak had a weather pattern the instrument was tracking that I hadn't been briefed on. Rule 3, I could give ground on. The stairs are 47 steps of metal grating in the dark, and low-light spatial disorientation is documented. And the instruction to use an environmental anchor wait for wind before continuing, is grounding technique logic. I'd been trained in field disorientation protocols. It was unusual phrasing for an operational rule, but the mechanics of it were sound. Rule 4. I tried again, in the methodical way I try things when my first approach fails. I looked for the operational framework. I looked for the context in which do not look directly at the tree line between 2,200 and 400 could be a safety instruction produced by professional, rational people in response to a real and documented event. I looked for that for about 2 minutes of concentrated thought. I could not find it. A fire lookout's fundamental purpose is to look at the forest. The entire professional rationale for my posting for any lookout posting is that trained human vision, applied consistently to a defined observation area, catches fires earlier than automated systems in complex terrain. The skill I was hired for, the identity I had rebuilt my post-injury sense of self around. Rule 4 didn't just restrict a behavior. It attacked the premise of the job. It said, there is a time window during which the most important thing you could be looking at must not be looked at directly. It said this without explanation, without apology, without any offered substitute. I filed it, finally, as a previous occupant's anxiety response. I told myself Delaney had developed a hyper-vigilant nighttime behavior pattern during a difficult rotation and had codified it as a rule to make herself feel procedurally grounded. I told myself the I promise on the back was the note of someone who needed to believe her own coping mechanisms were real. I completed the afternoon scan. I started the evening log. I checked my watch at 6:47 p.m. and began the radio check-in with dispatch while there was still a full hour of light left. Not because I was following Rule 1, I told myself, because I happened to finish in time anyway. I found the second side of the laminated card at 9:15 p.m. before my first night in the cab had fully settled into routine. I had turned it over to reread Delaney's handwriting, her note, her promise, and I noticed, printed below it in a smaller font size than the front, 3 more rules I had missed entirely on first reading. The text was small enough that casual reading of the back would catch only the handwriting, not what was beneath it, which may have been intentional, which may have been the point. Rule 5 told me that if the fog sat below catwalk level, I should not lean over the railing. Keep my hands inside the cab, it said, until the fog had cleared past the base of the tower. Rule 7 told me that if the tower's shadow fell in a direction inconsistent with the sun or moon position, I should go inside immediately, lock the cab door, and not check the shadow again until full daylight. I read those 2 rules. I noted them. They disturbed me. Rule 5 because of its specificity about hands. Rule 7 because of what it implied about the geometry of the world outside the cab. But I could hold them at arm's length the way I had held the others. They were strange, but they were containable. Rule 6 was not. Once per night, around midnight, you may hear what sounds like someone calling your name from below the tower. Do not respond. Do not lean out. Write down exactly what you heard in the log. Close the logbook and place it face down on the desk. I read it twice in the small overhead light of the cab, the forest dark on all 4 sides, the radio quiet on the desk. This rule didn't suggest something might happen. It said, "You may hear it, once per night." It had moved from the operational language of might and could into the declarative language of will. The previous rules all operated in possibility space. They set conditions for if-then responses to events that might occur. Rule 6 was different. Rule 6 was written by someone who knew, someone calling your name. Not a voice, not a sound. Your name, specifically. The name of whoever was in this cab. The rule assumed the phenomenon would know who you were. It assumed personalization. It assumed the thing below the tower, whatever it was, would call the new occupant by their current name, not a previous one, not a random name, the current occupant's name. I sat with that for a while. The cab windows were black on all four sides. I could not see the tree line. The Forest Service exterior light at the base of the tower was a single orange glow 70 feet below, which I could see by leaning slightly, but I did not lean. I sat with the laminated card in my hand and the rule in my mind and the specific, unlocatable cold of a fact that cannot be filed anywhere useful. I put the card face down on the desk. I hadn't written anything in the logbook yet. Rule 6's instruction was for the logbook specifically, and I hadn't broken it or triggered it. But I put the card face down anyway, without deciding to. The way you sometimes respond to the grammar of an instruction before you have consciously agreed to follow it. I noticed what I had done about a minute later, and sat looking at the card lying face down on the desk surface. Then I left it there. Day 2 opened clear and dry. The forest below the cab lit from the east in long, low light that made the canopy visible in detail all the way to the horizon. I had slept in the cot near the north wall, a light, surface sleep with the radio on low and the windows dark. And I was up at 5:30 a.m., which is the time my body has defaulted to since my first fire season. Some things the body keeps, even when the job that made them is gone. I ran the full morning routine with the deliberateness of someone performing a familiar procedure in an unfamiliar room. Weather reading first temperature, 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Relative humidity, 24% at elevation. Wind from the southwest building to roughly 11 miles per hour. Conditions for the day were forecast moderate to elevated fire risk. No red flag criteria yet. But the humidity trend was dropping, and I noted it in the log with the precision the protocol required. Then the Osborne check. I looked at it before I touched it, the way Rule 2 had made me look at it. It was centered on the map pin, exactly where it had been when I checked it before sleep. I noted this as a baseline and began the morning sector scan. The Osborne Firefinder is a beautifully simple instrument, a circular map of the surrounding terrain at scale, fixed to the pedestal, with a rotating alidade arm mounted above it. You sight through the alidade at a smoke source, read the azimuth off the degree ring, and cross-reference with readings from other towers to triangulate the fire's position on the map. The optics are clean and direct. There is no screen, no interface, no data translation between your eye and the terrain. You are looking at the forest through a sighting system, and what you see is what you report. I have always found the directness of it satisfying. I worked the full 360-degree scan in 4 quadrants, reading each sector for column development, smoke color, heat shimmer, unusual light diffraction. South quadrant clean, west quadrant clean. The western haze from the previous afternoon was gone, the humidity drop having cleared the air. North quadrant clean, a good sight line all the way to the ridgeline 3 miles out. Northeast quadrant, I paused. The northeast quadrant was clean. No smoke, no column, no disturbance. But I held the scan there for longer than the other sectors. The alidade resting at the edge of the bearing. The forest below it, dense and opaque, and running down into a shallow saddle between 2 ridgelines that I could barely make out through the canopy. Nothing visible, nothing wrong. I moved on. I finished the scan, called in the morning radio check with dispatch frequency clear, conditions moderate, no smoke sightings to report, and started the weather log. The routine absorbed me the way good routine does. By 9 a.m., I was in the clean, focused state that precise observation work creates. And for 6 hours, the tower felt like exactly what it was. A functional instrument positioned at elevation, operated by a professional, pointed at the horizon. The forest was a fire risk matrix, and a landscape, and a system I understood. The laminated card was on the desk, face up, because I had turned it over at some point in the morning. I do not remember deciding to do that. And I was not thinking about Rule 4. I was watching the western sector. I was doing my job. There is a specific, quiet pleasure in being competent at something when you have recently been afraid you aren't anymore. I want to say that plainly because it matters for understanding what happened next. For those 6 hours on day 2, I was good at this job. The injury that had pulled me from the field had not taken my eyes, had not taken my training, had not taken the part of me that knew how to sit still and read a landscape for what was wrong in it. The tower gave me that back. It gave it back so cleanly and so completely that I was briefly, genuinely grateful to be there. And then, in the early afternoon, I looked at the northeast quadrant again. The tree line appeared in a way I could not quantify, closer than it had been that morning. I found Delaney's logbook in the lower drawer of the desk, beneath a spare radio battery and a folded topo map. It was a standard Forest Service observation, log, green cover, acid-free pages, pre-printed date, and entry fields. It should have been submitted at the end of her rotation. Occupants are required to turn in their logs to the district office. It had not been turned in. It had been placed in the drawer deliberately, the way you place something you want the next person to find, without having to explain why you left it. The first 3 days of Delaney's entries were precise and professional in a way that I recognized immediately. She had the same observation vocabulary I did, smoke column descriptions using density, color, and dispersion angle, wind readings logged to the decimal, humidity trend noted not just as a number, but as a direction indicator for the day's risk calculation. She was good. Reading her entries felt like reading my own work from a parallel rotation. Same method, same attention to what was operationally significant, same deliberate separation of what she observed from what she inferred. Day 4 was mostly the same. I was almost reassured by it. Then, at the bottom of the day 4 entry, after the standard evening log notation, in slightly smaller print than her usual handwriting, firefighter moved. NE quadrant, no wind last night, no vibration, noted per protocol. per protocol. She was calling the Laminated card's Rule 2 protocol. By day 4, she had accepted it as standard operational procedure. By day 4, she had already stopped treating the rules as the anxiety-driven personal coping document of a difficult previous occupant, and had started treating them as legitimate guidance. I wondered how long that shift had taken. I wondered what had happened between day 1 and day 4 to make it. Day 5's entry was half finished. The weather data was complete temperature, humidity, wind, fire risk assessment. The sector scan summary was entered for 3 quadrants. The northeast quadrant scan note was not completed. Where it should have been, Delaney had written an azimuth coordinate instead. Just the numbers. No smoke description, no column assessment, no risk notation. Just the azimuth. The way you write a bearing when you are locking on to something specific and need to record it before you lose it. The entry stopped there, mid-sentence, in the middle of a standard log field. There were no day 6 or day 7 entries. The rest of the logbook was blank. I sat for a moment with the open book in my lap. She had been here for 5 days before she stopped writing. She had been here for what I calculated to be 9 more days before she filed the early reassignment request. That meant there were 9 days between the last entry and the day she left, 9 days unlogged, or logged somewhere I couldn't find, or simply not logged at all. 9 days in this cab with the laminated card and the dark windows and whatever was in the northeast quadrant. And she had stopped writing it down. I marked the azimuth coordinate in my own log, not in the standard entry field, in the margin, with a small circle around it. Then I stood and went to the Osborne. I set the alidate arm to the bearing. The sight line ran northeast, down into the canopy, toward the shallow saddle between the 2 ridgelines I had been unable to stop looking at that morning. I pulled the topo map and matched the bearing to the terrain. At that coordinate, no trail, no structure, no feature marker. A saddle, a gap between 2 ridges, half a mile into forest with no road access. Unremarkable in every cartographic sense. The firefinder was currently centered on the map pin, exactly where it should be. I looked at the coordinate on the map for a long time. Then I looked back at the Osborne. Then I went back to my sector scan, because that is what the afternoon protocol required, and because I am someone who does the protocol when the alternative is sitting with a thought I am not ready to finish. The western horizon on the 3rd evening produced something I had not yet logged from Harlan's Peak, a faint, pale signature on the lower horizon, about 18 degrees above the ridgeline, diffusing at the edges the way a smoke plume does when it hits an atmospheric inversion layer and spreads horizontally instead of rising. Not a column, not a developing fire. Something older, low intensity, already in late suppression stage or naturally dying. The color was almost white, with a slight gray cast on the leading edge, and it was dissipating irregularly, not dissolving cleanly the way moisture plume does, but fragmenting at the periphery in a pattern I had not seen in a natural smoke dispersal. I went to the Osborne and took the bearing. I noted the azimuth, the time, and my color description. And then I stayed at the instrument because the plume was still active, still changing, still producing the irregular fragmentation pattern at its edges, and I wanted to characterize it fully before the light dropped too far to read it. I have done this before. In the field, a fire that looks like it's dying is sometimes venting before a secondary run. And the difference between a late-stage plume and a suppressed fire-building pressure is visible in the dispersal pattern if you know what to look at. I was watching the dispersal pattern. I was doing my job. I checked my watch at 21:03. Full dark had arrived at some point while I was watching the horizon. I don't mean it was getting dark. I mean it was dark. The transition window had passed while I was at the Osborne, and I had not noticed it passing. And the evening radio check-in that Rule 1 required before the light failed completely was 4 minutes overdue. I stood still at the Osborne for a moment. The western horizon showed only the last residual gray of the plume, barely visible against the dark sky. Dispatch would be waiting for my check-in. Dispatch ran a 15-minute tolerance window before flagging a missed check-in as a potential situation. I had been here 3 nights. I had checked in on time both previous evenings without effort. Missing one check-in would not trigger an emergency response immediately, but it would flag my station in the rotation log, and someone would try to raise me. And if I didn't respond, the protocol escalated. The correct professional response was to pick up the radio, apologize for the late check-in, give my standard status report, and continue. Straightforward, standard. Something I had done dozens of times in the field without hesitation. I stood with my hand on the handset. If you miss the window, and it is already dark, do not use the radio until morning. The rule didn't say anything would happen to me if I used it. It didn't attach a consequence, a warning, a description of what the risk was. It just said, do not. The same flat imperative as Rule 4. No mechanism offered. No outcome described. No why. I thought about the third occupant, the one Callen would tell me about 2 days later, except I didn't know Callen existed yet, didn't know about the 3 early reassignment requests or the non-responsive confusion. I thought about Delaney's logbook in the drawer. I thought about the "these work" on the back of the card. I thought about the specific weight of a professional guarantee written by someone who had no operational reason to guarantee anything. I set the handset down. I stood in the dark cab with all 4 walls of glass around me. The forest invisible on every side. The radio silent on the desk. And I did the math that Rule 1 had forced me to do. My isolation from dispatch was now complete until morning. The one functional connection to the outside world was sitting 2 feet from my hand, and I had chosen not to use it. That choice felt like something closing. I made a note in the log. Evening check-in missed. Atmospheric anomaly on western sector demanded extended observation. Will update at 0600. That was the professional language. That was the version that went in the official record. I did not write what I was actually thinking, which was this. Whatever the rule was trying to protect me from, I had just made myself much harder to reach. At 0010, 3 hours after I had set the handset down, the radio produced a sound. Not a transmission, not a voice on the frequency, not the standard burst of carrier signal that precedes a dispatch call. A single, short, precise sound. Maybe 4 seconds that was neither static nor silence, but something occupying the space between them. A density, a texture. It was the sound of something that was not quite white noise, because white noise has no direction. And this sound had a quality I can only describe as pointed. It was aimed at the handset, through the handset, into the room. I had not touched the transmit key. I was across the cab from the radio, at the north window, watching the forest carefully, peripherally, exactly as Rule 4 instructed for the hours after 2200. I had not gone near the radio since setting the handset down. The transmission burst had originated from the equipment itself, without any input from me. Beneath the density, in the final second before it stopped, I heard 2 things. One was breathing, not loud, not dramatic, just the specific pattern of breath that indicates a person on an open microphone who has not yet spoken. And under the breathing, lasting maybe half a second, my name. Not clearly, not in any voice I recognized. But the shape of it was there. The phonemic structure of my name, in a cadence that was almost but not quite mine. In a pitch register that was human but wrong in a way I could not immediately categorize. I did not sleep. At 0600, I keyed the transmit, gave my call sign, and told dispatch I had missed the previous evening's check-in due to extended sector observation of a western horizon anomaly. I was professional and specific and entirely composed, because that is who I am when I am afraid. And I was afraid in a way that made composure feel like the only structure holding me upright. Dispatch asked why I hadn't called in when I finished the observation. I said I'd had an equipment anomaly. Not a malfunction, just a temporary irregularity I'd wanted to monitor before flagging it. Dispatch was quiet for a moment, and then the dispatcher told me that the frequency log from the previous night showed a transmission from my radio at 001. 4 seconds. I was listed as the originating station. I had never pressed the transmit key. Dispatch asked if I wanted a maintenance check scheduled for the next resupply. I said the radio was functioning normally as of this morning. I said I believed the transmission was a monitoring system artifact. I used specific enough technical language that dispatch accepted it, the way dispatch accepts specific technical language from field personnel who are clearly managing a situation. I could hear in the silence before the response that the dispatcher was making a note somewhere that was not the official log. That particular kind of silence is something experienced field people recognize. I ended the check-in, signed off with call signs, and sat with the handset in my hand for a moment before replacing it. Something had transmitted through my radio at 001. Something had said my name. Not clearly, not fully, but with enough phonemic precision that my auditory system recognized it as an attempt rather than coincidence. And whatever it was had used my radio to do it, without my hands, without my knowledge, in the 4-second window between one kind of silence and another. I opened the logbook to Delaney's last page. I looked at the unfinished entry. I looked at the azimuth coordinate, the half sentence that had simply stopped. Then I picked up my pen and wrote a single line below Delaney's last words. The first entry I had made in the log that was not strictly observational data. It knows I'm here. The radio proves it. On the fourth afternoon, at approximately 1640, I saw a figure at the base of the tower. I was in the middle of the eastern sector scan when the movement registered at the bottom of my field of view, a person-shaped form at the concrete pad near the supply cache. I moved to the south window and looked down, 70 feet to the ground, with the afternoon light falling directly on the base of the tower. A woman, alone. Day hiking clothes, light jacket, trail pants, running shoes that were wrong for the terrain, no pack. She was sitting on the edge of the concrete pad with her back straight and her hands in her lap, not eating, not drinking, not doing anything that indicated she had just stopped to rest. Just sitting, facing the tree line, which began 40 feet north of the cache. I opened the south side catwalk door and leaned out. "Hey," I called down, "you doing okay?" She looked up immediately, which suggested she had already been aware of me, had known someone was in the cab, had perhaps been sitting there, knowing I would eventually look down. She smiled. The smile was readable from 70 feet, which meant it was not a small smile. It was the specific, full-face smile of someone who wants to be reassuring. "I'm fine," she called up. "Just tired. I know the way back." Reasonable answer. Hiker behavior. Nothing operationally wrong. I asked if she needed water. She said she had some. I asked if she wanted me to log her as a visitor, so the trailhead knew she'd been in this far. She said that was all right. She'd be heading back soon. Her voice was even and clear and carried a flatness that I noticed without immediately categorizing. Not dull, not vacant, just unusually uninflected, the way a voice sounds when it is producing the expected words without the expected variation. I watched her from the catwalk. She did not move. She did not drink the water she said she had. She did not adjust her sitting position, check a phone, look at the sky, eat anything, or do any of the small, fidgeting things a tired person does when they sit down to rest. She sat with her hands in her lap and her face towards the tree line, and she was completely, perfectly still. 20 minutes passed. She did not move. The professional instinct said, "Go down." A lone hiker, wrong shoes, no pack, sitting motionless at the base of a remote tower 40 minutes before sunset. That is a welfare check situation. That is the kind of situation I would have descended for without hesitation in my previous life, when descending meant moving toward a problem rather than into a forest governed by rules I had not fully tested yet. I stayed on the catwalk and kept watching. I told myself I could monitor her from elevation. I told myself her verbal responses had been coherent, and her affect, though flat, was not distressed. I told myself she had said she was fine. I told myself all the professional language for why staying in the cab was the defensible choice. I knew, while I was telling myself these things, that the real reason I was not going down had nothing to do with professional language. I was not going down because 3 nights of rules had reorganized something in my decision-making. And I was no longer certain that the space between the tower base and the tree line was as ordinary as it looked from above. At sunset, I looked down again. The concrete pad was empty. The supply cache was undisturbed. The area around the base of the tower which had been dry and soft from the previous day's dew, showed the specific, impressionless quality of surface that had not been walked on. There were no footprints leading away from the cache. The ground around it was soft. Nothing had left. I logged the woman as an unverified visitor. That was the professional term unverified, meaning observed but not formally confirmed, not signed in, not recorded at a trailhead. I used the language the protocol provides for encounters that don't fit the standard categories. I noted the time, the description, the reported status, and the departure time. I did not note the absence of footprints in the soft ground. I noted the departure as 0800 approximately. Visitor left the area at or before sundown. Approximate. Passive. Professional language that puts distance between what was observed and what was recorded. Then I opened Delaney's logbook. Day 3. I had read it on the first day, cataloged it as a standard entry, moved on. I read it again now with the specific attention of someone looking for something they missed on the first pass. The morning weather data, the sector scan, the standard mid-rotation observations. And then, near the bottom of the entry, in a smaller print than Delaney's standard handwriting. Visitor, female, base of tower, sat approximately 40 minutes, did not leave tracks, logged and closed. I read it 3 times. I read the date. I did the calculation. Delaney had been in this cab a full year before me, assigned in a different rotation window, in different weather, different month, different atmospheric conditions, different forest phenology. Same woman, same position at the base of the tower, same 40 minutes, same absence of footprints in soft ground, same logging language closed, as if the event was a file that needed to be finished and set aside. 2 different women, 1 year apart, both trained, both experienced, both watching the same figure sit at the same spot for the same duration, and both without apparent communication or consultation, making the same choice. Neither of us had gone down. I sat with that for a long time. There is a specific grief in discovering that your instincts are not your own, that the decision you believed you made through professional calculation was instead a decision that something external had organized you toward. Not by threatening you, not by blocking you, but by building a context in which the choice you might otherwise have made simply no longer felt available. Delaney and I had arrived at the same behavior through the same reasoning because the conditions had been designed to produce that reasoning. We had both decided not to go down, and neither of us had understood that the decision was being made for us long before we thought we were making it. The rules were not restrictions. They were a channel. And the channel had been working for longer than either of us had been here. That night, for the first time, I followed Rule 4 completely. Peripheral vision only. No direct engagement with the tree line. When my eyes moved toward the northeast quadrant automatically, because that is what trained eyes do, they move toward the thing the brain has flagged as significant. I redirected them with a deliberateness that cost me something I didn't have a name for yet. I was not choosing to follow the rule because I believed in it. I was choosing to follow it because the woman at the base of the tower had no footprints, and Delaney had seen her a year ago, and I was suddenly, completely aware that the thing I had been most afraid of at Harlan's Peak was not the dark, or the rules, or the radio transmission at 001. Oh, it was the possibility that I was right. Callen arrived on the morning of day 5. I heard the truck before I saw it. The specific gravel road sound of a diesel engine at low speed, carrying across the still morning air from the trailhead parking area. Then, footsteps on the trail, unhurried, consistent, the pace of someone who has made this walk enough times that the 6.2 miles has stopped being a distance and become a procedure. I watched him come up the last quarter mile from the catwalk. He was somewhere in his late 50s or early 60s, compact and deliberate in his movement, wearing a district service uniform that had been washed enough times to lose any structural stiffness. He moved along the trail with his eyes on the ground. Not the canopy, not the tree line, not the tower. His eyes were down. He didn't look up at me until he was at the base of the tower. And when he did, he just nodded the brief, professional nod of someone completing a routine task and started climbing. I had the cab door open by the time he reached the top. He came in, set the secondary equipment kit on the desk, and started running the supply inventory against his checklist with the mechanical efficiency of someone who had done this check several hundred times. He went through the emergency kit, the battery reserves, the weather instrument calibration records. He opened the desk drawers briefly. I saw his eyes register the lower drawer, Delaney's logbook drawer, and move on without pausing. The laminated card was on the desk where I had left it, face up in the center of the work surface. Callen saw it when he set the equipment kit down. I know he saw it because of what he did, which was nothing. He did not pick it up, did not read it, did not ask what it was, did not move it out of his way. He worked around it with the specific care of someone maintaining deliberate distance from an object they have decided not to interact with. That kind of deliberate non-interaction is, in my experience, louder than almost anything a person can say. He finished the inventory, initialed his checklist, and folded it back into his shirt pocket. "You find everything okay when you arrived?" he said. It was the standard resupply closeout question. Neutral, procedural. "Yes," I said. "Everything was organized at the cache." He nodded. "Good." He started toward the door. I watched him for a moment. He moved like a man who was performing normalcy with some effort. Not distressed, not afraid, but attentive in the specific way of someone who has organized their behavior around a set of boundaries they've learned to maintain without announcing them. He had been looking at the floor of the cab. He had not looked at any of the 4 walls of windows. He had not looked at the tree line. "Callen," I said. He stopped at the door. "The supplemental protocol card," I said. "On the desk. Did you know about it?" A pause that lasted just slightly longer than a pause should. "How many nights have you been here?" he said. He didn't turn around. His hand was on the door frame at the top of the stairwell. 4, I said. He was quiet for a moment. When he spoke again, his voice had the careful flatness of someone delivering information they have been carrying for a long time and have thought about how to say. "Follow Rule 4, he said. "The rest you can adapt to. Not Rule 4. Then he started down the stairs. I went out to the catwalk and watched him descend. Callen. I kept my voice even. I need more than that. He stopped at the second landing, one hand on the rail, and looked up at me. The morning light was full and direct, and I could see his face clearly. He did not look frightened. He looked tired, in the specific way of someone who has been asked a question they know the honest answer to, and have decided how much of it they are willing to give. How many early reassignment requests from this tower? I asked. He looked at me for a moment. Then he said, 3, in 6 years. I asked about the occupants. He gave me the minimum. All 3 had described the same card. All 3 had followed the rotation to different points before requesting out 1 after 2 days, 1 after 5, 1 after 11. The 1 after 11 days was Delaney. She had filed the request and been driven out by Callen himself. And she had sat in the passenger seat for the entire drive to the district office without speaking. And when he had asked her if she was all right, she had said, I understood something. I just need to be somewhere else now. He told me this plainly, without drama, in the way of someone recounting a documented event. Then he told me about the third occupant, not Delaney, the one who had been found at the base of the tower. A man, he said, a decade ago, before Delaney, before the previous occupant between them, assigned to Harlan's Peak for a standard 7-day rotation. Did not call in a reassignment request. Did not call in at all. After day 3, his radio check-ins simply stopped. The district sent a ranger for a welfare check on day 5 of the radio silence. They found him at the base of the tower, sitting on the concrete pad near the supply cache, in the position of someone who had sat down to rest and had not gotten up again. Not injured, not unconscious, not physically distressed in any documented way. Non-responsive. He had not reacted to the ranger's approach, had not responded to his name, had not flinched when touched. His eyes were open. He was breathing normally. He did not know where he was, or what day it was, or how long he had been sitting on the concrete. The welfare log recorded the finding as occupant found in non-responsive confusion. Cause undetermined. He was transported to the nearest hospital. 2 days later, his cognition returned. He had no memory of the previous 48 hours. Nothing. Not the tower, not the forest, not the cab. 48 hours of his life simply absent, like a page torn from a logbook. He never came back to the district, never filed the incident report the district office sent to him 3 times, never explained what had happened in those 2 days. Callen told me this the way you tell someone a fact you have been carrying for 10 years and have stopped expecting to put down. Not as a warning, not as a horror story, as a data point that he had been required to hold and had held because there was no proper place in the official record system to put it. I watched him resume his descent. He moved with the same unhurried pace he'd come up with, steady and measured, and without any of the urgency I was feeling vicariously on his behalf. At the base of the tower, he turned toward the trail without pausing. He walked the full perimeter of the tower's concrete pad and out onto the trail, heading south. He did not look at the tree line once, not once in either direction, not on the approach, not at the base, not on departure. In 20 minutes of full exposure to the forest's perimeter, he never turned his eyes toward the trees. His gaze went to the trail, to the ground, to the mid-distance above the canopy. Never the tree line itself. Never once. That was when I understood that Callen was not someone who didn't know about the rules. He was someone who had been following his own version of them for 20 years. I woke on the morning of day 5 in the flat, alert way of someone who has not been fully asleep. The cab was lit gray from the east, pre-dawn, the forest below still in the last dark before the canopy catches light. I lay on the cot for a moment, running the standard orientation check radio off, but charged, windows intact, wind from the southwest audible against the glass, my own hands visible in the gray light. Everything measurable was measurable. Everything locatable was located. Then I looked at the Osborne. It had rotated. Not dramatically, not spun to the opposite bearing, not knocked to the floor. Rotated. The alidade arm was no longer centered on the map pin. It had moved clockwise, away from true north, by what I estimated at first glance to be a significant number of degrees. I sat up and went to it in the early light and leaned over to read the degree ring. 34 degrees from center, pointing northeast. I stood with my hands at my sides and did not touch it. Rule 2 was explicit. Do not move it back. Note the new bearing and begin the morning scan from that position. I breathed and I followed the rule. And I wrote, Firefinder, 34 degrees northeast of map center. No wind disturbance overnight. No seismic event reported. Bearing noted. Beginning scan from this position in the log before I did anything else. Then I set the alidade and looked through the sight at the bearing the Osborne had pointed itself to. The northeast quadrant opened in the crosshairs at the precise bearing I had marked in the margin of my log 5 days earlier, when I had mapped Delaney's azimuth coordinate. The same number, the same sector, the saddle between the two ridgelines, half a mile into forest with no road access, unremarkable on any map I had been given. I pulled the USGS topo. I laid it flat on the desk and ran my finger to the grid coordinate. Contour lines for a shallow saddle, maybe a 40-foot elevation difference between the ridgelines on either side. The saddle would be sheltered from wind, relatively level, accessible only by off-trail navigation through dense second growth. No trail, no marker, no feature of any documented operational significance. The Osborne had moved overnight, 34 degrees. Pointing at a coordinate, a fire lookout from a previous rotation had written 3 times in increasingly pressured handwriting before her pen had torn through the paper. Pointing at a location that had no official existence in any record I had been given. I radioed dispatch after the morning check-in and asked, as professionally as I could, whether any historical incident data was associated with the grid coordinate. I gave them the numbers. I said I had a possible anomalous reading on the firefinder and was cross-referencing with terrain features. The dispatcher ran a search. I listened to the specific silence that fills a radio channel when someone is conducting a database search and coming up with either nothing or something they are deciding how to communicate. They told me the coordinate was outside the active monitoring zone. Historical records for that area, if any existed, would require a formal records request. Processing time, 2 to 3 weeks. I signed off and sat looking at the coordinate on the topo map for a long time. 2 to 3 weeks. The rotation was 7 days. By the time the formal records request produced anything, I would be 200 miles from here, and someone else would be in this cab, looking at the same northeast quadrant, looking at the same saddle, following or not following Rule 2, based on whatever their first morning's rationalization produced. Whatever was at that coordinate had been there long enough to accumulate historical records that required a formal request to access. That was not a recent phenomenon. That was institutional. I went back to Delaney's logbook, and I read the last entry as if I had never read it before. Which is to say, I read it as evidence rather than data, looking for what she was trying to say beneath what she had written. The entry was dated. The weather readings were complete. She had gotten through the full morning log. The sector scan was noted for 2 of the 4 quadrants. In the northeast quadrant field, where the scan summary should have been, there was the azimuth coordinate, written once. Then, slightly below it, written again with a different number, the same coordinate, but with the final digit changed. Then a third time, the original number again, as if she had written it, second-guessed herself, and then written the first version to confirm it. Or as if the number had been different when she looked a second time, and she had rechecked and recovered the original, and written it down again to anchor it. That image of a competent professional writing the same coordinate 3 times because she needed it to stay still did something to my breathing I did not expect. Below the 3rd coordinate, the handwriting changed. Not dramatically, but the pressure was different. The pen had been pressed harder, the letters slightly less formed, the spacing compressed, the handwriting of someone who is trying to write quickly because they're afraid they will stop. It isn't in the trees. The trees are in it. That was all. The sentence stopped. The pen had not lifted. Cleanly, there was a scoring in the paper at the end of the period, where the tip had dragged or pressed through rather than been raised, as if the hand that wrote it had stiffened. I read it 6 times. It isn't in the trees. The trees are in it. The grammar of it stayed in my head the way a wrong calibration reading stays, not because it is alarming, but because it reorganizes the scale of everything else. I had been thinking about the tree line as a boundary. The forest on one side, the cleared area around the tower on the other. The thing, whatever it was that the rules were organized around, was in the forest, and the rules were about managing the interface between the tower and the forest's edge. That was the model I had been working with. Delaney's last sentence broke the model. If the trees were not the container, but a component, if the tree line was not the boundary, but part of what was on the other side of the boundary, then where was the boundary? What was the thing containing the trees? What was large enough, or deep enough, or structured in a way I had no vocabulary for, that a forest of second-growth shortleaf pine and mixed hardwood running to the horizon in all 4 directions was something it held rather than something it was. I looked out the north window. I kept my eyes above the tree line, precisely by approximately 15 degrees of arc. I had not made a conscious decision to do this. My eyes had found the position before I noticed they were moving. I was not choosing to follow Rule 4. I was afraid to break it. Night 5. I was inside before sundown, which I had started doing by day 4, without officially acknowledging I was doing it. The way you make behavioral adjustments around a hazard before you have formally categorized the hazard. The cab was lit by the desk lamp, warm, small, aimed at the logbook, and beyond the glass on all 4 sides, the forest was its standard nighttime opacity. Nothing unusual in the first hours. Wind from the southwest, consistent. Temperature dropping into the low 60s. I was running the peripheral scan, eyes moving in the methodical 15-degree arc I had calibrated over the previous nights. Not looking at the tree line, looking across it, keeping the image in the side field where Rule 4 required it to stay. At 00:43, I felt the air change. Not the temperature, the texture. A dampness that arrived without the gradual build of normal weather. A sudden weight in the air, inside the cab, that preceded the visible fog by perhaps 2 minutes. I turned to the south window. Nothing yet. Turned east. Nothing. Turned northeast. The fog was coming from the northeast. It built in the visible distance with a speed that is not meteorologically standard. Not a fast fog, not dramatic, but faster than the moisture load and temperature differential should have produced. Inside 15 minutes, it had reached the tower base and was climbing. Not filling the air gradually the way normal ground fog does, but rising in a specific horizontal plane, the top surface flat and distinct like a water surface. By 01:05, it had reached the level of the second stair landing. By 01:18, it sat exactly at catwalk level, its flat upper surface aligned precisely with the catwalk floor. The tower's steel structure visible for the 20 feet above it. Everything below that line invisible. The cab was above the fog. I was above the fog. I checked the rule. If the fog sits below the catwalk level, do not lean over the railing. Keep your hands inside the cab. The fog was not below the catwalk. It was at the catwalk. Its flat surface was flush with the catwalk floor, which meant that leaning over the railing would mean putting my hands and face above a flat, gray surface that I could not see through, that I could not confirm was empty. That was the precise condition the rule was designed for. I did not lean over the railing. I pressed my face close to the glass of the south side cab wall and looked out and down at the catwalk from inside. The fog's flat surface ran in all directions under a thin layer of stillness. The catwalk railing was visible above the fog level, the top rail, the mid-rail, the lower rail bar, the one closest to the catwalk floor, was partially obscured by the fog's surface, except on the northeast side. On the northeast side, the lower rail bar was visible. Barely the fog was right at the level where the rail disappeared into it. But I could see about 8 inches of the bottom rail, and on that 8-inch section of steel, there were marks. I got the flashlight from the desk. I pressed the beam against the glass, a poor optics decision, light scattering off the pane, and switched to the catwalk exterior light instead, which I had been avoiding for the sound it made in the night air. The exterior light came on and caught the northeast railing section in its range. Handprints, wide, smeared from below to upward, as if hands had pressed against the underside of the railing bar and dragged upward. Multiple impressions overlapping. The specific smear pattern of hands that were pressing from below the catwalk floor level. reaching up through the space where the fog sat, gripping the lowest railing bar from underneath. Not from above, not from the catwalk surface, from below, from inside the fog. I turned off the exterior light. I stood in the cab in the dark, with my back against the interior north wall, away from the glass, and I counted my breathing deliberately, the way I do when I need to keep my body performing normally, while my mind processes something it does not have a framework for. I kept my hands in the cab. The fog cleared by 0232, gradually the way fog should. By 0300, the catwalk was visible and empty. Nothing there. Nothing on the railing. Nothing on the floor surface. Nothing on the stair landing below. I waited until full daylight to go outside. At 0610, I walked the full catwalk perimeter in clear morning light, stopping at the northeast section and crouching to look at the lower railing bar from above. The marks were still there, wide impressions on the underside of the steel. The pressure had been significant enough to leave trace oxidation disruption in the galvanized coating. I took photographs with the district-issued camera, working through the documentation the way I had been trained to document evidence at a fire origin. Systematic, sequential, no emotional notation in the framing. I did not include the photographs in the official log. Night 6. I had been running the peripheral scan for 4 consecutive nights by then. 4 nights of disciplined eye movement, of training my vision to stay in the lateral field when it wanted to center, of overriding the trained, professional instinct that lives in my hands and eyes and says, look directly at the thing you are trying to understand. 4 nights of that, and I had not broken it. I want to be precise about this, because the break-in of Rule 4 was not a failure of discipline. It was a decision. I made it with full information and clear intent. At 2347 on night 6, the northeast tree line was producing something that peripheral vision refused to resolve. Not movement, not a light, or a shape, or a presence I could name. A quality. A depth quality, the specific visual phenomenon of volumetric inconsistency, where a surface that should have consistent depth across its field is doing something different in one zone than in all the others. Like a flat painting, where one section appears to recede or protrude because the paint is thicker there, except not the paint, the space itself. The tree line in the northeast quadrant was doing something that the edge of my vision kept reporting, and my center vision was being prevented from confirming. I turned and looked directly at it. I knew I was breaking Rule 4. I made the choice in full knowledge of the rule and with the specific intention of a fire lookout who has been told not to look at the thing they are being paid to look at, and who has reached the limit of what professional identity will accept without verification. I looked because I am a person who looks at things, and I needed to know if I was right. The tree line was flat. I don't mean it appeared flat. I mean it was spatially, geometrically flat, not a volume of trees receding into depth, not a forest of layered trunks and gaps and undergrowth producing the complex, three-dimensional visual field that a forest produces. A surface. A flat surface that had the correct visual texture of a forest, the right color variation, the right contrast between trunk and space, the right density of vertical elements, but occupied no depth. Like a photograph of a forest, printed at enormous scale and mounted at the tree line's position, replacing the actual trees with their representation. And at one point in the northeast sector, the surface was being pushed outward, pushed from behind. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, but visible a distortion in the flat surface, a bowing outward at a central point, the way a wall bulges when something on the other side presses against it. Not a creature, not a shape, a pressure. Something of significant scale, applying pressure against the flat surface of what had been trees from the other side, pushing it toward me, the photograph of the forest deforming under its weight. I closed my eyes. I counted backward from 30. My mouth was dry. My hands were flat on the Osborne pedestal. I counted with the deliberateness of someone performing the only task available. 30, 29, 28. When I reached 1 and opened my eyes, the tree line looked like trees. It had depth. It had volume. The northeast sector was dark and dense and entirely ordinary in the way forests are at midnight. The distortion was not there. The flat surface was not there. The forest was a forest. I stood at the Osborne for a long time without writing anything. Then I opened the logbook and wrote 2347, direct observation, NE sector. Rule 4, broken intentionally. Rule 4, confirmed necessary. And below that, in smaller writing, D was right. It works. I was shaking, not with cold, not with the dramatic trembling of someone in a horror film. The specific, fine motor shaking of a person whose central nervous system has registered a threat that their professional training has no category for. My hands were steady enough to write. The pen did not betray it, but the shaking was there, and I sat with it, and I breathed. And I did not look at the northeast sector again that night. At 00:52 on night 6, I discovered that I had left the emergency satellite beacon in the supply cache at the base of the tower during the day's supply organization. Battery check on the beacon was a routine maintenance item. Check every rotation. Log the battery level. Replace if under 20%. I had done this check on the previous rotation at my training posting. I had missed it here, distracted by the logbook and the Osborne bearing and Callen's visit. The beacon was sitting in the supply cache 70 feet below me, battery status unknown. And without a functioning emergency beacon, my connection to the safety network beyond the radio was compromised. I put on my boots. I took the flashlight. I opened the cab door to the stairwell. I started down. Step 1, step 2. The metal rang under my feet in the flat tone I had cataloged on the first climb. I kept the flashlight aimed at the tread directly ahead, counting automatically, not because I had decided to count, but because counting steps is a reflex I built over hundreds of ladder climbs in my firefighting years, and the reflex does not pause for rules. Step 10. The wind was present, consistent, from the southwest, moving through the stair structure with the standard pressure sound I had been using as a baseline for 6 nights. Step 15. The stairwell was ordinary. The flashlight was steady. The fog from earlier had fully cleared, and the night air was clean, and I was moving efficiently toward a necessary task, which was what I was, which was who I was, and the rules were a laminated card on the desk in the cab above me, and I was a professional doing her job. Step 20, step 25, step 31. The wind stopped, not died down, not faded, stopped. Between one step and the next, the constant southwest pressure, which had been audible for the full 16 hours of my previous waking period, which was the ambient sound of the entire structure, simply ceased. The silence that replaced it was not normal quiet. It was the specific, pressured silence of a space that has had its sound removed rather than merely lowered. Active silence. Intentional. I stopped. I sat down on the stair tread, the way Rule 3 required. My flashlight was still on, aimed at the grating between my boots. The stair tread was cold through my pants. The silence was complete. I waited for the wind to return. I waited for 11 minutes. The silence did not change. I waited for 20. The silence held the same active, present quality, not emptiness, not natural stillness, but the particular silence of a space that is being kept that way. I waited for 35 minutes, with my back against the handrail, and the flashlight between my knees, and the forest invisible on all sides below the level of the second landing. At 47 minutes, I stood. I had not heard the wind. The wind had not returned. Rule 3 said to wait until I could hear it again before continuing. Rule 3 offered no instruction for the situation in which the wind did not return. No contingency, no alternative, no second step in the protocol if the first condition of safety could not be established. I went back up the stairs. I did not descend to the cache. I did not retrieve the beacon. I went up, counting the remaining steps allowed in the dark, and I reached the cab and sat on the cot and did not sleep. The wind returned at some point before dawn. I heard it come back in a single, clean arrival. Full pressure, as if a door somewhere had been opened again, but I did not note the time because I was not sure I had been fully conscious when it happened. And I do not log what I am not certain I observed. The beacon battery check remained unlogged. I started writing before sunrise because there are things you have to write down while they still feel real, before the daylight reorganizes them into something you can dismiss. On the morning of day 7, I wrote a reassignment request. I had the legal grounds for it clearly organized in my mind before I opened the notepad, the unsolicited radio transmission at 0010 Night 3, which the frequency log confirmed without explanation. The handprints on the northeast railing photographed and documented. The inoperability of the emergency beacon I had been unable to retrieve. The Osborne movements on multiple mornings. Delaney's logbook, which should not have been left in the desk, and which I had a professional responsibility to flag. Any one of those items constituted grounds for an incident report. All of them together constituted grounds for an immediate welfare-based reassignment with no professional penalty to my record. I wrote 2 paragraphs. I read them back. I held the notepad in both hands. Then I tore the page off, folded it twice, and placed it at the bottom of the desk drawer. Not because I was not afraid. I was afraid with the specific, organized clarity of a person who has assessed a threat and understands its parameters. And I want to be careful not to make this sound heroic, because it was not. It was something closer to the feeling you have when you have already been through the door, and going back through it would not change where the door had taken you. I had broken Rule 4. I had been told that the previous occupant who broke Rule 4 had written "I understood" on her reassignment request and filed it the next morning. I had understood something similar, not in language, not in an articulable framework, but in the way that direct sensory experience generates understanding that precedes the words for it. And what I had understood was this: the northeast coordinate, the coordinate the Osborne kept pointing to, the coordinate Delaney had written 3 times in deteriorating handwriting. It was not a location of something dangerous. It was a location of something that had happened, something previous, something that the rules were organized around, not to prevent, but to commemorate. The rules were not a warning. They were a record. Someone had been here before Delaney, and before the third occupant, and before all of them. And they had survived something at that coordinate, and they had come back and written down everything they had learned, and they had left it for whoever came next, because they understood that whoever came next would need it. The original author of the rules was still protecting people, 40 years later, from inside a laminated card, still patient, still present. If I left without filing what I knew, without formally associating the northeast coordinate with a records request that might eventually produce the 1986 event report, someone would come here next rotation and find the laminated card and follow the rules without knowing why they worked. The way Delaney had, the way I had. The rules would keep surviving, but the understanding behind them would keep being lost. And eventually, someone would come who didn't follow Rule 4. And no one would be there to tell them what the original occupant had known well enough to write down. I needed to complete the records request. I needed to file one night more of precise observation data. I needed to stay. I put my notepad in my pack and started my morning sector scan. The forest below was dense and green and entirely ordinary in the full morning light. The Osborne was centered on the map pin. The final night began at sunset. At 22:05 on the final night, the radio activated. Not a transmission, not a voice on the frequency, the carrier tone, the specific electronic tone that the district radio system uses to establish a channel before a voice transmission sounded for 4 seconds and then went silent. I had not touched the equipment. I was at the north window with my back to the desk, running the peripheral scan, when the tone sounded. I turned and looked at the handset. The indicator light was dark. No active transmission, no channel open. The tone had appeared from inside the equipment without establishing any connection to anything, the way a phone rings once from a number that doesn't exist when you call it back. I noted the time in the log and did not pick up the handset. Rule 1. At 23:18, I checked the Osborne. It had moved again further east than yesterday's 34 degrees, now pointing at a bearing that was past the northeast saddle and into the ridge beyond it. The alidade arm had rotated an additional 12 degrees clockwise since I had last noted its position at 1800. I did not touch it. I wrote the bearing in the log. The fog arrived at 00:52. Faster than night. 5 inside, 8 minutes from first trace to full catwalk level. The flat upper surface settling in that same precise horizontal plane as before. I was already inside. I pressed my hands flat against my thighs and did not approach the railing. I did not lean toward the glass. At 0112, I heard my name from below the tower. I want to be exact about this, because what I heard matters more than almost anything else I am going to tell you. The previous noise on the radio on night 3 had been ambiguous a shape, a phonemic structure that might have been my name, or might have been the auditory pattern-matching tendency of a frightened brain finding familiar sounds in interference. I had noted it as a possible and moved on. This was not a possible. This was my name. My full name, first and last, in a voice I recognized the way you recognize your own handwriting, not because you can describe it analytically, but because the specific formation of it is yours, produced by your own mouth, shaped by your own breath pattern and laryngeal tension, and the particular way you hold the beginning of a word when you are trying to sound calm. That last part is the part that stopped my breath. The specific inflection I use when I am managing my own fear and trying to project steadiness. The inflection from my radio check-ins. The inflection from my conversations with Callen. The inflection from 4 minutes of conversation with a dispatcher who would later confirm that my radio had transmitted 4 seconds of sound at 001:03 nights earlier. Something had been listening, not just for my name, for how I said my name, for the specific performance of composure that I had been giving for 6 days. And it had learned that performance well enough to reproduce it from below my tower at 0112 in a fog that sat at catwalk level with handprints on the lower railing. My voice, calling my name from below. Calm. I sat at the desk. I picked up the pen. My hand was steady, the specific, professional steadiness of a person whose entire coping mechanism is observable precision. I wrote, 0112, voice from below tower. Subject, my name, full. Vocal pattern, match to self, estimated 90%. Inflection, calm managing. Duration, approximately 8 seconds. Repeated once at 0114 with identical pattern. I closed the logbook. I placed it face down on the desk. I put both hands flat on the desk surface and breathed. The fog began clearing at 02:30. By 03:18, the catwalk was empty and visible and silent. The only sound the return of the southwest wind, which had continued uninterrupted all night, which had not stopped on these stairs, for which I was quietly and precisely grateful in a way I had no language for. At 02:15, the shadow moved. The moon was in late western, set at 02:15, tracking northwest in a west-northwest arc that should have thrown the tower's shadow due southeast, long, sharp-edged, falling across the cleared ground below the supply cache and into the first band of understory at the base of the southern tree margin. I had been watching the shadow periodically throughout the night as a calibration tool, the way you use known reference points to anchor your spatial orientation when other cues are unreliable. At 02:15, the shadow fell due north, not southeast, not even south. Due north directly opposite the moon's position, falling away from the light source rather than away from the tower as light source geometry requires. I looked at the moon, still in west-northwest position, visually consistent with its tracked arc for the previous hour, I looked at the shadow. Due north. Shadow running from the base of the tower toward the northern tree line, hard-edged in the moonlight, perfectly defined, cast by a light source that would have needed to be positioned due south to produce it. There was no light source due south. I stood at the south window and looked at the shadow for 6 seconds. Then I turned and went to the interior north wall, away from all 4 windows, sat with my back against the wall and my knees drawn up, and I locked the cab door. Rule 7. The rule said, go inside and lock the cab door, and do not check the shadow again until full daylight. It did not explain what the wrong shadow meant. It did not explain what was happening outside the cab during the period in which the shadow was wrong. It did not describe what I would have seen if I had leaned over the south railing, or pressed my face to the glass, or done any of the things that the rule was preventing me from doing by removing me from the window. I sat against the north wall with the locked door between me and the stairwell, and all 4 walls of glass giving out onto whatever the world had become at 02:15. And I did not look. I thought about what Callen had told me about the 3rd occupant. 48 hours of missing time, sitting at the base of the tower in the position of someone who had simply stopped. The welfare record noting non-responsive confusion, cause undetermined. I thought about where those 48 hours had gone, whether they had been lost inside a wrong shadow interval, whether the cab had been somewhere else during a period like this one, and something had been next to it that the 3rd occupant had, unlike me, looked at. I sat against the wall. At 04:10, I moved to the east window and looked at the tower's shadow. It fell due west, correct for the position of the moon in early pre-dawn. I stood at the window for a full 2 minutes, verifying the shadow's direction against the lunar position, verifying the geometry, verifying that the world outside the cab was shaped the way it was supposed to be shaped. Then I went to the Osborne. It was pointing at the northeast coordinate, the furthest bearing it had reached across the 7 nights. The Alidade arm extended northeast by 46 degrees from map center, aimed precisely at the saddle between the 2 ridgelines that no official record acknowledged. I took out the topo map. I placed the bearing on the coordinate. I wrote the azimuth in the log once. Then I looked up, blinked, and looked at what I had written. I wrote it again, a second time, to confirm. Then a third. All 3 numbers matched. I went to the south window and looked out at the trees. They were trees, dense, second-growth shortleaf pine and hardwood, the canopy beginning to gray at the edges, with the first approach of dawn light. They had depth. They had volume. Individual trunks were visible at the margin, the understory below them catching the earliest gray, the forest receding in proper 3-dimensional space toward the interior. The tree line was not flat. The world was the shape it should be. The wrong shadow was gone, and wherever the tower had briefly been at 02:15, it was here now. My voice did not call my name again. Dawn arrived. I was at the desk, pen in hand, logbook open. I was still alive. I was still here. I had followed every rule on the worst night, all of them simultaneously. The full behavioral protocol of a document written 40 years ago by someone who had survived something in a saddle between two ridgelines and had come back and written down everything that had kept them alive. I began my final morning observation log. I have always worked problems forward, from available data to conclusion, without filling in the gaps with assumption. It is the professional reflex of fieldwork. You map what you can verify, and you mark the unverified sections clearly. And you do not pretend the marked sections are the same as the verified ones. But on the morning of day 8, packing my equipment in the gray, early light of the cab, I had enough verified data to map something larger than I had been willing to see while I was still inside the week. I pulled the topo map one last time and set it flat on the desk next to the Osborne. The northeast coordinate, the saddle. I ran the terrain analysis the way I would for a fire origin investigation, working backward from the point of significance, asking what the landscape did in relation to that point. The saddle sits at the convergence of two drainage lines. It is geographically sheltered. Wind patterns from all quadrants would be deflected by the ridgelines, creating a dead zone in the saddle that would be notably quieter and more still than the surrounding terrain. It is not visible from the current tower position, but it would have been visible from a different elevation. I went to the supply cache drawer, the deep one at the base of the desk that I had been using for map storage, and found, beneath the topo folios, a single page that had been folded into quarters and tucked flat against the drawer's back panel. Brittle paper, thermal printed, the kind of district office maintenance record that predates the current database system. I unfolded it carefully. It was a decommission report for Tower 4-N, dated November 1987. Tower 4-N. The previous structure that Harlan's Peak had been built to replace had stood on a different ridgeline, half a mile north of the current tower's position. From that ridgeline, the saddle would have been directly in the primary observation sector. Tower 4-N had been decommissioned after its sole occupant in the 1986 season had filed what the record described in one line, in the specific compressed language of official documents that are trying to reference something they cannot fully contain, as an observation event report, non-standard, District Archive, Form OER-86-1. I had never heard of Form OER-86-1. It was not in my training materials. It was not in my briefing documents. It was not in the protocol binder that sat on the desk beside the radio. The maintenance record noted that Tower 4-N had been structurally decommissioned the following spring, and that Harlan's Peak Tower had been constructed as a replacement at a different ridgeline position, with improved sightlines on the western and southern fire risk sectors. It did not explain why the replacement had been sited away from the northeast observation axis. It did not explain why the original tower's primary sector had been effectively abandoned. It used the language of improvement and efficiency, and the language was precise, and I read it the way you read any official document that has been very carefully written to not say what it knows. I folded the maintenance record and put it in my pack. I did not include it in the official log. The 1986 occupant of Tower 4-N had filed a non-standard report. They had survived. They had used an official form, had reported through channels, which meant they had come back, had been coherent, had possessed enough professional stability to file a document. They had also been the last person to occupy a tower with a direct northeast sightline to the saddle. Every structural decision made at Harlan's Peak since 1987 had been made from the position of people who knew what the 1986 report contained. The rules were not folk memory. They were institutional. Someone in a district office had read Form OER-86-1 and had responded not by investigating, but by relocating the tower and placing the coordinate outside the active monitoring zone and building the replacement structure at a bearing that prevented direct observation of the saddle. They had not eliminated the threat. They had aimed the glass walls away from it. And then, someone the 1986 occupant, or someone who had read their report, someone with enough understanding of what the northeast coordinate contained, had written the rules and left them for the next person, because redirection was not the same as safety. And they knew that whoever sat in the new cab would need to know how to survive the nights when it found them anyway. I packed slowly, and I thought, and the thinking had the quality of assembling something you have been carrying in pieces without knowing they were meant to connect. Rule 1 silences the radio after dark, removes the transmitted signal, the electronic beacon that announces position and identity and presence to anything that perceives it. The radio is a voice. The rule makes the voice go quiet. Whatever is in the northeast sector responds to transmitted sound after dark, or is drawn by it, or uses it to locate. The rule removes the target. Rule 2 redirects the Osborne to the northeast bearing every morning. It does not prevent the movement. It acknowledges that the movement will occur and instructs the occupant to follow the bearing's direction. The rule is not a restriction. It is a message delivery system. Something is pointing the instrument toward the coordinate every night. And the rule says, look where it points, not to investigate, to know. Stay oriented. Keep the thing you are tracking in your awareness, even when you cannot see it. Rule 3 stops the occupant on the stairs when the wind stops. The wind stopping is an approach condition. The dead zone of the saddle's geography extends outward under certain atmospheric conditions. And when it reaches the tower's immediate environment, the wind stops, as it does in the saddle itself. The rule pins the occupant in place during approach windows, above the ground, above the threshold of whatever requires ground contact to operate. Rule 4 prevents direct visual engagement. Looking directly establishes confirmation. It makes the observer's presence real in whatever perceptual framework the thing in the northeast operates within. Direct looking is contact. Peripheral vision is not. The rule is not about what the occupant sees. It is about what sees the occupant back. Rule 5 keeps the hands inside during fog. Fog is a transit medium. The things that move through it toward the tower do not require the occupant to initiate contact. They only require exposure, proximity, surface. Keeping the hands inside prevents the incidental contact that the fog is designed to facilitate. Rule 6 keeps the occupant silent when called. The voice from below, the voice that learns the occupant's name, that learns their vocal pattern, that produces a perfect replication of their composure inflection, is a response mechanism. It is testing for reply. A response would be a confirmation of presence, an acknowledgement, an acceptance of the communication channel the voice is attempting to open. Silence closes the channel. The logbook entry and face-down placement is a deflection, a way of processing the event without responding to it. Rule 7 gets the occupant inside when the tower is elsewhere. When the tower's shadow is wrong, the tower has briefly occupied a different spatial position. And whatever is present in that position is not the ordinary forest. Going inside and locking the door does not prevent the transit. It reduces the surface area of exposure during the time the tower is in that other place. The rules are a survival protocol for a specific interactive phenomenon with specific triggers. Not a haunting, not a monster. Something that operates on principles of contact, confirmation, and response. Something that has been attempting to establish a communications interface with the tower's occupants for at least 40 years, using every mechanism available to it. And that is stymied at each mechanism by a set of rules that refuse the interface at every stage. Whoever wrote the original rules had understood the mechanism, had mapped it, had reduced it to 7 behavioral instructions, simple enough to laminate and leave on a desk. I stood at the desk with the laminated card in my hand, and I thought about who that person had been. The 1986 occupant of Tower 4-N. Alone at elevation, above a saddle that should have been unremarkable, with none of this to guide them. No card, no Delaney note, no Callen. Just the thing in the northeast, working through its methods, night after night. And one person sitting in a glass cab, working backward from the evidence to the rules. Surviving, coming home, writing it down. I turned the card over and read Delaney's note. These work, I promise. D. I uncapped my pen. Below her words, in my own handwriting, I wrote, they do. M. I put the card back on the desk, centered on the work surface, face up. I left it there. I descended the 47 stairs at 07:15 in full morning light, counting every step aloud. Not silently, out loud, at a normal conversational volume, not for any reason Rule 3 required, since the rule specified nighttime descents and the rule's conditions were not present, but because counting aloud is a grounding technique, and because I had been in this glass cab for 7 nights, and the act of saying numbers in my own voice in the open air, hearing them absorbed by the morning forest and the steel stairs and the specific acoustic environment of a 70-foot tower structure, was something I needed. To hear my own voice doing something ordinary, to use it for arithmetic rather than for the thing it had been replicated for. 47. I stepped onto the concrete pad, solid ground, not elevated, not glass-walled, not watched from 4 sides. Ground. The dew-damp concrete was cold through the soles of my boots, and the morning air at ground level was 10 degrees cooler than the cab, and carried the full complexity of forest floor smell. Pine resin, damp earth, the specific organic depth of old leaf matter. I stood on the pad for a moment and breathed it. The supply cache was undisturbed, latched correctly, no signs of contact. I opened it, retrieved the emergency beacon, performed the battery check I had been unable to complete 3 nights earlier. Battery level, 76%. Functional. I logged it in the rotation record, initialed the maintenance line, and closed the cache. The ground around the base of the tower was soft from the overnight dew. I looked at the surface of it, not at the tree line, not directly. My eyes trained now to the specific peripheral arc that Rule 4 had built into my vision over 7 nights. I could see the ground clearly in peripheral. I could see the concrete pad, the cache edge, the cleared area between the tower base and the tree line's first margin. There were no marks, no impressions in the soft ground, nothing that had left or arrived at ground level in any way I could document. I shouldered my pack. I oriented to the south trail. I began the 6.2-mile walk to the trailhead parking area. I did not look at the tree line once. In the direct, centered, professional way I had spent 6 years looking at everything. I kept the forest in peripheral. I moved with my eyes on the trail, on the mid-distance, on the canopy above the same trained peripheral scan I had built over 7 nights, applied now to a daylight walk on a clear forest trail. And I want to be honest about what that felt like. It felt like the appropriate level of caution. It felt calibrated. It did not feel like paranoia. That was the part that sat with me for the entire 6.2 miles. The 6.2 miles were ordinary. The forest was the forest it had always been, in daylight, dense and green, and visually complex and indifferent. No sound I could not account for. No movement in the tree line I could not attribute to wind or bird or the normal animation of a live forest in morning air. I walked it efficiently and without incident, and reached my truck in the trailhead lot at 09:38, and sat in the cab for a moment with the engine off. The Forest Service road ahead of me, my hands on the wheel. Then I drove. I filed my rotation report at the district office at 13:30 the same day. The report was accurate. I want to say that plainly. The observations were precise. The weather data was correctly recorded. The sector scan logs were complete for every morning and afternoon of the 7-day rotation. The fire weather trend I had documented showed a continued humidity decline in the region I flagged the western sector for increased monitoring through the following week. The incident notes contained one deviation from standard format. One line at the bottom of the form's notes field that I had written and rewritten 3 times before settling on language I could submit without it being flagged for a welfare review. Supplemental protocol card found in station. Card is accurate. Recommend laminating a replacement for next occupant. That was the entire official record of what had happened at Harlan's Peak Tower across 7 nights. The rotation report, the weather data, the sector scans, and one line recommending they laminate a fresh copy of the card for the next person. The supervisor accepted the report without comment. I was processed out, given the standard rotation completion paperwork, and told my next posting would be assigned in 2 weeks. I thanked the desk staff and drove to my apartment and sat in the parking lot for a while before going inside. 3 weeks later, I submitted a formal records request for the 1986 observation event report from Tower 4-N. I used the form number from the Decommission and Record, OER-86-1. I submitted it through the district office with a cover note citing routine historical review of prior incident documentation for the Harlan's Peak monitoring area. The district office responded in 11 days Their reply stated that no Form OER-86-1 existed in the current records management system for Tower 4-N. The form designation itself was not in the current system's index, which suggested it predated the 1994 records digitization project and had not been migrated. They recommended I contact the regional archive. The regional archive took 4 days to respond. They confirmed a physical file from the 1986 decommission of Tower 4-N in their off-site storage. They described the file's content as a fire weather observation log, standard document, 7 pages. They sent me a scan. 6 pages were standard fire weather data, temperature readings, humidity trends, wind logs, smoke observation notes. Professional, precise. The same vocabulary Delaney had used. The same vocabulary I used. The handwriting of a competent field person doing methodical work in a remote posting. The 7th page was not fire weather data. It was a list of rules, handwritten, in cramped and careful print, the writing of someone who had thought about every word and compressed them to the minimum necessary. The rules were numbered. There were 11 of them. I read through the list twice, quickly, looking for the familiar structure, and found it. 7 of the 11 rules were mine, phrased differently, some of them different wording for the same behavioral instructions, the same prohibitions, the same if-then structures, but recognizable. The same rules Delaney had followed, the same rules I had followed. There were 4 rules I did not recognize. I read the 4 unfamiliar rules 3 times each. 2 of them extended the behavioral protocols I already knew. One concerned a specific behavior during the period when the Osborne bearing exceeded 50 degrees from center. It had reached 46 on my final night. I had left the next morning. And one addressed a protocol for if the self-voice repeated more than 3 times in a single night. I had heard mine twice. These were rules for deeper exposure than I had experienced. Rules for the nights that came after the nights I had survived. Rules that the current laminated card did not contain, because nobody who had been at Harlan's Peak had yet needed them. The 3rd unfamiliar rule addressed the fog condition when it rose above catwalk level. The current Rule 5 covered catwalk level. The 1986 rule went further, and I read it carefully, and I decided not to think about what it implied. For the night the fog sat higher than I had seen it. Rule 9 in the original list was the one that changed the quality of the air in my apartment when I read it. If you have already looked, stay. You are already known. No protocol attached. No behavioral instruction. No if-then structure. No alternative. Just, if you have already looked at the tree line directly, stay in the tower. You are already known. The act of looking directly had established a contact that could not be undone by leaving. The 1986 occupant had understood this, had written it down, had included it in the original list, and someone, at some point between 1986 and the current laminated card, had removed it, had simplified the card to 7 rules, had left out Rule 9. I don't know if they left it out because they thought it was unnecessary, or because they thought it was too frightening, or because they had not yet encountered the person it was written for. I had broken Rule 4. I had looked. I had counted backward from 30. and the tree line had looked like trees again when I opened my eyes, and I had written, "D was right. It works." And then I had stayed for the final night and survived the final night and walked out of the forest in the morning light, counting stairs and breathing pine damp air and telling myself it was over. Rule 9 said it was not over. Rule 9 said I had already been known from the moment I turned and looked at the flat tree line at 2347 on night 6. That whatever registered the direct gaze had registered mine. That the distance between the tower and wherever I was now was not, from the perspective of the thing that had registered it, a meaningful variable. I closed the scanned file on my laptop. I sat in my apartment, 200 miles from Harlan's Peak, in a second-floor unit, in a building surrounded by parking lots and streetlights, and the ambient sound of a city at night. And I thought about the fact that I had followed every rule and survived every night, and walked out correctly, and filed my report correctly, and recommended laminating a replacement card for the next occupant. I had done everything right. I told myself this in the calm, organized voice I use when I am reviewing a completed checklist. I had done everything right. Last night, I woke at 02:10. The building's ventilation system was running. The sound of it is familiar to me after 4 months in this apartment, a low, distributed hum with a slight whistle in the eastern vent. I lay there in the dark and listened to it, running the standard inventory of familiar sounds the way I do when I wake at night, confirming that everything I was hearing had a source I could account for. Everything had a source I could account for. And then, from below my window, from the parking lot or the street or the small stretch of ornamental trees between the building and the sidewalk, from somewhere below, somewhere at ground level, somewhere I would have had to lean over the windowsill to see I heard my name. My voice, my full name, the specific inflection I use when I am trying to sound calm. The same pattern, the same cadence. I did not go to the window. I counted backward from 30 with my eyes closed in the dark of my apartment, my hands flat on the mattress. The city noise outside containing my name in a voice I recognized. When I reached one, I opened my eyes. The ventilation hum, the streetlight through the curtain, my hands on the mattress. I got up. I went to the desk. I opened the notebook I have been keeping on the nightstand. A standard observation log, the kind I have used for years, because some habits are too structural to leave behind. And I wrote exactly what I had heard. The time, the source, direction, the duration, the vocal pattern. I wrote it the way the rule instructs, exactly what you heard. Then I closed the notebook and placed it face down on the desk. I went back to bed, and I lay there in the dark, and I thought about calling Callen. I have his district number. I have been thinking about what I would say. I have been trying to decide whether he knew, whether his 2 decades of servicing Harlan's Peak Tower meant he had his own version of the protocol, his own set of rules for the drive out and the walk in, and the delivery of supply kits to a cab where someone was following a laminated card and not yet understanding what it was. I have not called him yet. I am trying to decide whether there is a rule for this, whether somewhere in the original 11 or in the 4 I don't have, or in the document that preceded even those, there is an instruction for what to do when you are 200 miles from the tower and your own voice still knows where you sleep. I am following what I know. I am writing it down. I am placing it face down. I am trying to decide whether surviving something is the same as being free of it. I don't think it is, but I have not stopped following the rules.